Evening everybody, and welcome to the Development Management Committee. First thing I have to say is that those present at the meeting should be aware that by law it can be recorded by anyone attending. This means that the meeting can be filmed, audio recorded, photographed or reported electronically by the use of social media. But this does not apply to any part of the meeting that is held in private session, which we have some tonight. Therefore, anyone present should be aware that they could be recorded at this meeting, and any member of the public who does not wish to be filmed should move to an area of the meeting room away from any camera. And anyone recording must cease as soon as the meeting is declared closed. Is anybody intending to film tonight? No? Okay. The meeting is also being webcast by the Council, and members are asked to use their microphones when they wish to speak, and then the camera will swivel round onto you. Right, item 1 then, substitutions.
We've got Councillor Malcolm Cowan for Siobhan Elam, sorry.
Thank you. And apologies, same.
Councillor Elam, yeah, thank you.
Item 3, minutes to confirm as correct record the minutes of the meeting held on the 1st of March. Do we agree those? Thank you. There are no items of urgent business that I have been notified of. Declaration of interest by members. I will declare that I am a member of North Midlands Parish Council, but not on their planning committee. Nobody else? Okay, thank you. So, item 6, 51 Bridge Road East, Welwyn Garden City, erection of 54 residential flats consisting of 19 one-bed, 35 two-bed, with associated access, car parking, amenity space and landscaping involving demolition of existing office building.
Thank you, Chairman. The application has been brought before Planning Committee as the site is located in the employment area, which is a departure from the local plan. 51 Bridge Road East is located in a central position within Welwyn Garden City, within the employment area. It currently comprises of a vacant office block set back from Bridge Road East and Turin Road. The site comprises a substantial area of hard standing and is generally flat, but 2.7 metres lower than street level in the southeast corner. There is an existing access from Bridge Road East or through the industrial area to the southeast. The application site has prior approval for 38 dwellings of an unknown bed number, which was granted in 2017. The proposal seeks to redevelop the site and erect 51 flats in 3 blocks, which are located around the perimeter of the site. Vehicular access would remain from Bridge Road East, with new pedestrian accesses created in Bridge Road East and Turin Road. The proposal would meet full provision of affordable housing, car parking provision, cycle spacing, and would have no impact on neighbouring properties and would improve the landscaping of the area. This is just an indication of the sizing of the properties. Again. And then these are just some photos to demonstrate the existing area. So this is the existing building as it stands. And this shows the level of hard standing that's currently in place with the building, which is currently vacant. And this shows the mature screening belt that is going to be largely retained. And this shows the change in ground levels between properties.
Okay. Thank you. Building that is familiar to everybody here, I should imagine. We don't have any speaker on this tonight, so councillors, questions, comments? Malcolm.
Thank you. For once, this isn't a prior approval, though it does stem from a prior approval. And I think members are aware of my views on prior approval. The fact that they've used that as possibly used it as a lever to get this in. I don't know whether that's true or not, but it looks a bit that way. I was really annoyed. I don't know if everyone got the communication from the Wimpey North Thames or whatever it is, North Thames Wimpey, whatever, basically saying if we didn't get this, they'd go back to the prior approval, which I regard as a blackmail, which I think is very, very unfortunate. But there's one particular point in this which I think is relevant, which is in para 935, and it's talking about there should possible future developments, and says there should be a large degree of buyer beware on a scheme such as this. In other words, we convert this to or redevelop it as residential, but then if somebody wants to redevelop for industrial or commercial premises nearby, they may be constrained by the fact that this has become residential. And this really does point up an enormous danger, because we've not only lost this amount to employment land, we potentially are impacting other developments which may come along later. And I really do think it's high time we went back to the government and said again, I trust it's again, that this policy of prior development, prior approval, is having a major adverse effect on this, certainly on this district. I don't know if it's as widespread in other areas, but we've lost an awful lot of land, and we're stymieing potential other developments that might take place. We're pretty much forcing them to become residential as well, so that you avoid sort of noise and other type impacts. So, I would hope there would be some support for us writing to government and pointing out this kind of stuff, because it really is important. Whether it was envisaged at the time, I don't know. But I mean, the scheme itself, I think, is actually quite a good one. But that doesn't mean that we should roll over and say, okay, that's great, and we don't mind it constraining other ones nearby. So that's my comment.
Paul, yeah.
I was really quite conflicted with this, because I do think it is quite a well-designed scheme. It's delivering the full suite of affordable housing. So there were some really significant pluses to this development. I was reassured that the council, when it vacated this building, did so without being quoted a price for the renewal of the lease. So the justification for this building being vacant is perhaps supported in that, because obviously that was a concern as well. However, I do come back to the idea that we are about to put forward a local plan that has in it exceptional circumstances for release of greenbelt for employment land, and we are here looking at a development on employment land that we are saying is no longer required. And I think that is still a hypocritical position to take. We can't say there are exceptional circumstances because we don't have enough employment land and then hand away employment land for residential housing. So I reluctantly will be voting against this on that basis, because I, for one, I'm not happy to release employment land that's designated employment land for residential and then see a local plan go through. So it's on that principal point that I'll be going against. Having said that, I think that it's quite a good development in its own right. The problem is that it's employment land.
About that, the particular building that's there at the moment, of course, looks redundant. Is it 60s, 1960s, early 70s? It's not up to modern standards. Nobody would take it as an office. The other option would be to knock it down and for somebody else to develop an office scheme there. But what is the point on the
area? But the difficulty that we have is that the principle of the change of use to residential is established by virtue of the prior approval process. It's not that we're happy to release the employment land, it's just that that decision is effectively taken at a higher level with the prior approval process. And so in those circumstances, what we come back to is a scheme like this that seeks to make the best use of that land, having established the principle of releasing it.
And that, with the prior approval in place, there is a fallback to, residential in the block. But nevertheless, that's a fairly substantial site, and it's the block that's residential. The designation of the curtilage is employment land. You could actually say, well, actually you could develop a mixed-use development on that site with that residential block and employment use on the rest of the land. You may argue that it's too small and, you know, constrained, and there are other issues with it. But nevertheless, in principle, it is employment land, and we are releasing it for a residential development. And I think that that is problematic. I wouldn't have a problem with this if there wasn't a release of greenbelt land in the local plan for employment land. I wouldn't have a problem with this. It's fundamentally that I have an issue with.
I'm going with the officers and think this is going to be a good development. There is the Norton Abrasives building behind. It's been used just for this, that and the other. So that's industrial. So the people can use that. But I can't see anybody flying into the borough and saying, oh, I'm going to build a factory here, I'm going to do this. What we are short of is affordable housing. So I like this idea. It looks attractive. We'll tidy up that corner, because on the other side of the road, where there were offices, they are now going to be residential. And on the Nabisco site, it's going to be residential. So I like this idea. Thanks.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I think, as has been pointed out, this scheme perhaps makes the best use of the land, given that there is prior approval for residential. And certainly the attraction of affordable housing is something that we can't ignore. And also the mixed tenure, which I think is really important for us as a council. The building has been vacant. I think we're all in agreement it is an eyesore currently. And so any development, and I think this looks like quite a nice development. I quite like the idea of 3 blocks rather than 1. Communal areas is a good idea. I do have a question around the maintenance of the communal garden area, given the mixed tenures. So maybe that's something, if it's not included as a condition, I don't know how we can manage that, because what I would hate to see is that fall into disarray over time. There is an issue about the density. So suggested density is 30 to 50 dwellings per hectare, but obviously this is much higher. But actually, given the site, the affordable housing units, I think it's something we can accommodate. I like the mention of electric car points, charging points. That's something I bring up at most of these planning meetings, and I think if that can be incorporated, that would be a good idea. I also have a question actually on page 29.65. Just wonder if officers could explain in relation to the Hearts waste. I wasn't sure about the detail on that, perhaps. And just at 9.66, the report mentions refuse bins, but there's no mention of recycling. And I think that would be a great shame if that has not been taken into account. I'm hoping it's just an omission from the report. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so in regards to the maintenance of the communal areas, that's within condition 7 at the bottom, point G. In regards to the recycling, that's included when we mean refuge and recycling. Yes, that. And yeah.
And with regard to the County Council's area of search, that means that the whole employment area is a potential area of search for locating new recycling facilities, waste transfer facilities, but we don't have a site that's been chosen, so we can't take that into account in considering this application. We don't know that there's going to be one next door, for example.
Yes, the
county are looking at, they couldn't turn around and said, you can't build here because we're starting to think about it.
Yeah, I did ask a detailed point of officers a few days ago, and we're not quite sure what the final answer is, which was about parking, because the report actually says the parking should only be for should only be for residents. And my question is, what will happen to visitors? Because the whole area is, double yellow lined. It's not really practical to say you can park on the street and walk into the development. So I think it's important that whatever the parking regime is, it allows visitors to go in for a reasonable period of time. So I wondered whether a final conclusion has been reached on that.
Okay, so that was it would be managed under the car parking management plan, which is one of the conditions. So visitor parking would be considered.
The report says it should only be for residents.
Yeah. So parking is in accordance with our car parking SPD, and we have a condition for a car park management plan, and as part of that the applicant will need to demonstrate how they're proposing to allocate spaces to residents and whether there will be spaces available for visitor parking. Our SPD doesn't require additional spaces for visitor parking. That's built into the calculations, as best I understand, within the SPD, so the overall parking amount that's proposed for each unit type, effectively. So we will still have an element of control over how the parking is going to be allocated, because it's part of a condition the applicant will be required to address should permission be granted.
Visitor tries to go in and either gets ticketed or told he can't go in, whatever the regime is.
In a fairly central location, there are parking opportunities available in the town centre. I appreciate that's a short walk, but I don't think it's unreasonable to expect visitors to do that. Also, one might expect visitors to these properties, the majority of visitors to these properties, to be in evenings and weekends when the employment area is less well occupied with on-street car parking in the way that it is now. So there are potential opportunities for alternative visitor parking, but as I say, there is also the condition which allows us to control that to a degree in terms of parking allocation.
What is likely to happen, has happened in nearby blocks to this, is that although it's 1.25 parking spaces for a one bed and 1.5 spaces for a two bed, it may well be that the one beds will only have one parking space each allocated, and the two beds one parking space allocated, and then there will be some communal ones, some of which are for visitors parking, and that happens to some of the other blocks nearby to this.
Yeah, I noticed, observed some of the other blocks. Some have one or two spaces, and others have a fairly generous provision, and clearly it's the latter one would wish to see, so that people aren't constrained. I mean, it's all very well saying you can walk from the town centre, but it's at least 10 minutes, probably more like 15 minutes to get there. And it is yellow lined, double yellow lined all round. So the fact that maybe less people, in the nearby employment zones doesn't mean you can actually gain space on the street.
So I mean, just following up on the points about parking that Malcolm made. What you failed to say as officers is that part of that condition is that you are satisfied there is adequate provision for visitors as a component of that condition, and without that adequacy of provision you will not be permitting the development. What I'd like is some reassurance that there will absolutely be some visitor parking spaces appropriately negotiated with the developer as part of the parking plan. Because I point you at the Sparrowhawk Peregrine Road area that does have a couple of visitor parking spaces, and contrast and compare that with the Hatfield Villages airfield development, where finding somewhere to park as a visitor is impossible, because you will get ticketed, because there is a very robust parking thing, and there are no parking spaces for visitors at all anywhere that I can find, and that's not acceptable. So some balance between the two would be quite nice.
Council will need to agree that condition. We've heard what you've had to say, as has the applicant, and so we can definitely take that on board in considering that condition should permission be granted. There is the opportunity to provide additional parking on the site if it's needed, but that would mean eating into some of the quite well landscaped areas that are proposed. So there's always a balance to be struck, but we will certainly take on board with your comments. Thank you.
We could strengthen number 22 a bit. So prior to the first occupation development, hereby permitted the proposed access on-site car and cycle parking turning area shall be laid out, demarcated, and we could add something like, and adequate parking for visitors agreed with the council. Or 23. Shall we do that? Shall we strengthen? I mean, you're happy if we do this. We strengthen the condition to specifically mention visitor car parking. Yep. Okay. Paul, on your point about the industrial use, the office use, it is true that the plan has a certain amount of green belt development for commercial. However, if we can get 54 units on here, if we were not able to do so and it maintained or retained the commercial usage, we'd have to find that 54 elsewhere, and because of the numbers, the 54 would then have to go on green belt. So it's moving one to another in a sense.
You would be correct. Were the objectively assessed need number to be modified in the light of windfall housing developments, but in fact the windfall numbers in the local plan I think significantly underestimate what the actual windfall developments have been and will continue to be, and actually that's one of the issues that I have with the allocation of the current sites in the local plan. So I'm not convinced by that particular argument, because I think this development of 54 houses is coming along too late to be accounted for within the OAN and the release from Greenbelt that's proposed within the submitted local plan.
There we are. Now, oh right, sorry, Tara.
I've just got a very quick question, just going back to what Paul was saying about the property and this idea of the use of it, etc. Who actually owns the building at the moment? Do we know?
The Ramblers Association.
Who? The walking people? Yeah. Right, lovely. Okay, fine. Well, no, I mean, look, I think my point is, I was picking up on something that was said earlier about who's going to take this place. It's not wired up enough for modern business, etc. So whoever goes in there, it's a huge intervention. Why bother? You can go to somewhere that's, fully, equipped elsewhere, and it's already all done. And my thinking was, is it just left to fall into that sort of decay? So in the end, we've got this sort of fait accompli. We end up having to go residential because no one else would take it on as a business unit, and therefore we just all get disrupted and messed about, and we get bent out of shape with our planning, because then properties next to it, because of this neighbourhood aspect thing, they can't then be designated what they should be in our plan, etc. But it's all fallen apart because it's the Ramblers Association. I was hoping you were going to say Taylor Wimpey owned it or something, and then I could go into a big spiel about how they let this happen, etc. But fine.
Thank you, Chairman. Up until December 2015, it was our housing office. It is. I went in there frequently. I've been having the housing portfolio at that time. It is, frankly, not fit for modern office purpose. It has, if you went in there, even at that time, there were huge patches where there were leaks and all the rest of it. the boilers haven't worked efficiently for many years, and so that would all. So it is a building that unfortunately has come to the end of its useful life.
Thank you, Chair. I did want to add, though, I'm slightly disappointed by the lack of response from the commissioning group or the GP premises office in response to consultation, and of course no suggestion for any 106 contributions towards health or care or actually education. So bearing in mind that there are potentially 100 residents going to live in this block, I think that's very disappointing that A, they haven't responded, and B, that there is no requirement or no request.
Just to follow on what Mandy just said, is when we left the building, if I'm not mistaken, if the Ramblers Association had a tenant for that building, we, the council, would have had to have brought it back to some sort of standard before the tenants moved in. It would have been down to the council to do it, and that was part of the lease. Yeah.
Just to come back, Councillor Thompson, on the point about education and healthcare, it's a point you've heard me make before about the pooling restriction, and that both those bodies have to pick and choose their schemes very carefully where they will seek contributions to in order to ensure that they accrue the biggest amount of money in their pot effectively as they can. As I understand it, certainly the Education Authority have taken the view on this scheme that it's not big enough having regard to some others in the area, and so they haven't asked for contributions.
No, thank you. No, and I appreciate that, and I know you have explained that previously. I just seem to get the feeling we have a net loss, though. That's my gut feeling, that because of all of the individual schemes, none of which are large enough, that we're in danger of losing out, certainly healthcare-wise.
Shall we have a proposal from somebody? Nick, thank you. Thank you. With the strengthened condition. Yeah.
Chairman, can I just say, the proposers and seconders must put their mics on. You cannot hear at home.
Right.
It's a really frustrating thing.
Okay.
I propose that we accept officers' recommendations, including the add-on regarding the parking condition.
Yeah, and I second that.
Those in favour of the recommendation, please show. Eleven. Those against? 2. Okay, that is carried. Item number 7 is 33 Brookside Crescent, Cuffley. Erection of new building to accommodate cats on a short-term basis, including change of use to mixed residential and cattery.
Thank you, Chair. This application is presented to committee following a major objection from Cuffley Parish Council, as set out at paragraph 9.1. The application seeks permission for the creation of a mixed use at the site to include residential and a cattery in the rear garden. The cattery structure would be approximately 9.4 metres wide, 4.3 metres deep and 2.5 metres high. Just scroll through. And can accommodate up to a maximum of 12 cats at any one time. The design of the building is functional, although not dissimilar to many garden rooms and outbuildings, and the exact appearance is identical to others within the franchise. Just one point to note, the Council's environmental health officers have considered the application and raised no objection, subject to conditions, and note that this would be similar to other Longcroft cattery franchises within the borough.
Thank you.
Right, so I'm Abby Purser. Thanks for having me here this evening, everybody. Longcroft Luxury Cat Hotel is born and bred Welwyn Garden City. We started our very first cat hotel in Welwyn Garden City in Longcroft Lane in 2010. We basically take care of your cat when you're on holiday. Since then, we've gone on to change in industry, really. We're all about having far less cats, with much more space and incredibly clean, very good processes, and expert care. Following on from that, so we began in our family home in Welwyn Garden City as a single concept. We had a huge amount of demand, and we were just incredibly busy, couldn't cope, and decided, how do we grow the business? I didn't have a couple of £1 million, so the only other option really was to franchise. Which we did successfully, and we opened our second hotel 2 years afterwards. We then went on to keep serving the local community. We've got 1,000 5-star reviews through all of our customers, which is fantastic. Obviously went on to franchise the business in a considered and careful way, with the focus always on animal welfare and hygiene as a priority. We now have 19 locations throughout the UK, all but one operating successfully within residential areas. Our design is thoughtful, and our processes surrounding hygiene and cat welfare is quite robust. I'm British Equestrian Olympic team, so that's where my animal welfare knowledge comes from. All of our cat hotels are very small scale. Your average cattery will be made of timber. Ours is made of UPVC, so it's impervious to germs and smell. We only have 6 suites per hotel, but they're much larger than you'd usually see. So we're all about having less guests, but with more space for animal welfare purposes. Yes, your average cattery will have between 30 to 50 rooms and is typically made of timber. We offer a sustainable way of individuals to work from home. Maybe they're topping up their retirement, so we're a sustainable business, so you're not trugging off in your Land Rover or your gas guzzler to work. We've got national recognition. We are changing an industry. The cattery industry hasn't seen any change for about 50 years now. So we're really sort of leading the way of bringing an industry up, kicking and screaming, to improve the standards throughout the UK for everybody. Thank you. We were named by The Guardian to be the best and most exciting small business in the UK in 2017. I went on to win Entrepreneur of the Year for Hertfordshire in the SME Business Awards, which we're very proud of. And I'm proud to be founding director of a true born and bred in Welwyn Garden City business, and I'm enjoying every moment changing an industry that's remained largely unchanged for over 50 years. Done. Perfect.
Right. Questions or comments? Paul.
The actual structure itself. You say it's UPVC, polycarbonate roofing, so it's UPVC from floor to roof. But it, yeah. Okay. Right. Okay. So is it on sort of traditional concrete footings? So, okay. It's not a dug foundation. All right. Okay. Okay. Yeah. Cat conservatory. Yeah. 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 I'm fine.
Okay, perhaps. Right, okay, let's go.
Oh, look, I think it's a great idea. I mean, I'm going to fully support it. It looks amazing. I love the idea that, first of all, there's clearly a demand for it. I love the idea of you saying sweets, boutique, stuff like that. I mean, my dogs would be so jealous. And I love the idea that it's also you know, like you were saying, people can have it in their homes, you know, people that are no longer in the sort of, should we say, traditional employment market. I think it's an amazing thing. So, you know, well done you, and I totally support it.
Yeah, I think it's a brilliant idea. Just one query. Was there just the one objection from one neighbour?
Yes, I believe there was. Yes, we didn't receive any other objections.
Sorry, through the chair. Sorry. Sorry, yeah, I should have looked at you. Was there just one objection?
And the parish council as well.
Oh, and the parish council. And I did read the reasons why. Are they? Can you give me some more information on that?
Yeah, I think the reasons that the parish council called in, well, they set out in the report at 9.1, but they were concerned with hygiene issues, which I think are adequately addressed in the report, and clearly our environmental health colleagues have considered that with the other Longcroft franchises in the borough. This is to operate in the same way. There's a condition to that effect, so we don't have any concerns about that at all.
Waste.
Indeed. Yeah.
Thank you. I was going to pick up on just the Northaw and Cuffley Parish Council objection, but obviously I note there's nobody here tonight speaking on their behalf, which is always frustrating. No, just to say that obviously I know that the original Cat Hotel is based in my ward, and obviously Malcolm will be aware as well, lives quite close to it, and to my knowledge there have never been any objections, or as in problems with, you know, hygiene or noise, etc., etc. Having said that, I am conscious of the location of the site plan. There could be up to, I suppose, 6 cars every 2 days or so coming and going. So that would be the only, I suppose, the impact I could see. However, that's probably not strong enough reason to turn down the application. And yeah, the hygiene I think is important, and I think that's been addressed. I feel reassured that you look after your cats, and hopefully the franchisees do also. And it's quite a well-run model. So with response to the neighbour representations, yeah, I guess the allergies and asthma problem that could apply to anybody having cats in a neighbouring property. So unfortunately that's not I don't think that carries much weight, really.
So, whereas other cats are wandering about the streets and the gardens and having 6 dinners in different houses. Okay, Paul, still flashing.
I just wanted to follow on from Tara. I think it's a great opportunity as well, but I just also wanted to say to officers that I'm thinking of framing 1.3 as the most unusual thing I've seen written in a planning report. The applicants currently have 2 of their own domestic cats as a pertinent point.
Right, Malcolm, yes.
Me up on this one. I live pretty close to this. I know when it started up, there were some of the neighbours had a few concerns. I went and spoke to some of the neighbours last week. They were pretty happy. The only real issue was they felt that the comings and goings of the vehicles was a little bit of an issue. This obviously the Longcroft Lane one is on a through road with some parking. This is at the end of a cul-de-sac. Would there be a highways issue if people parked on the outside of the bend, so having not been there to see how big it is, if a couple of people arrived there and parked on the outside of the bend, is that going to obstruct other vehicles going round? Because living on a loop a little bit like this, people tend to go in one way and out another and can't always change it because it's sometimes a bit tight. And is there room in the front garden for some degree of parking of people coming and going? Yeah, up and beyond what the residents have got.
I have visited the site. There is room on the road for a car to pass with a car parked on the outside of the road there. There is also limited off-street parking when you take into account the residents of the property, but I think we have to bear in mind the length of time it would take to drop off and pick up a cat is quite short, so yeah.
But I've just got something, because I obviously support it, and what I'd like to say is when we get to propose it, can I propose it? Because my surname's Lyons. So, as head cat, I want to be the one to put this through, if possible.
For reasons of solidarity, then.
Okay. I propose, as head cat, that this goes through.
As a Leo, I second it.
And watch them when they're on holiday.
We take photographs and send us videos instead every 2 days.
Do you? Right. Sorry, I didn't have my microphone on when I announced the result, but that was unanimous. Thank you. Right, now the last one tonight is 66 Brooklands Avenue, Brooklands Park, erection of two-storey rear extension, garage conversion, replacement of front porch and alterations to opening and roof.
Thank you, Chair. This application is presented to the committee following a major objection from North Mims Parish Council for the reasons set out at paragraph 8.1. Members will note that planning permission for similar larger extensions was granted in 2016. The current application proposes a number of changes from that scheme, and these are set out at paragraph 9.8 of the report. In particular, this includes the change of the front porch from two-storey to single-storey, the depth of the two-storey rear extension reducing from 4 metres to 2 metres, removal of rear balconies, and an increase in the number of skylights in the rear roof slope. The materials proposed are as were approved in the 2016 application. With regard to the design and appearance of the proposals, they'd be of modern design, but the character of Brooklands Avenue is considered to be varied and that the proposal would not be overtly out of keeping with other properties in the area. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Now we have a speaker on this tonight. Parish Councillor Linda Saffer. You know the rules, Linda. 3 minutes.
Yeah. Good evening, everyone. North Mims Parish Council have carefully considered the application submitted in respect of 66 Brooklands Avenue, including the amendments following the change of roofing materials. There is exact permission which is not hugely different from the amended application in front of you now. However, as a precedent for the two-storey glazed front porch has already been set in Brooklands Avenue, therefore it would be less out of keeping. The new proposal is unsympathetic with the street scene, particularly as the neighbouring properties have brickwork to the ground, render and half timbering at the first floor, and clay tiled roofs. North Mims Parish Council are not the style police and are aware that there are a variety of architectural designs in the road now. It is unfortunate, therefore, that this proposal is so incongruous and that reduction in size of the front porch makes the appearance all the more dominant and out of keeping with the street scene. There is no doubt it will be visible, obtrusive, given the mismatch it will create in its surroundings. Whilst innovative designs is not a bad thing per se, there is a time and place for it, and a rural village built mostly in the vernacular materials is most suitably not the right place. It may be too late on this application, as the exact permission is not different, but North Mims Parish Council consider that a rural village deserves better conceived designs and finishes which are sensitive to the location. If an application comes back with changes, please can officer ensure the amendments fit the location and street scene rather than satisfying the whims of the designers who do not have to look at the results every day. That's all. Thank you very much.
Could I ask the officers then if we could have a front elevation so we can look at this?
So the front is the one on the top left as you look there?
With the fully glazed porch.
With the ground floor,
The ground
yeah,
floor
single-storey
glazed
glazed
porch.
entrance porch, yeah.
And the slated roof.
That's correct.
Okay.
This revised application was originally submitted with a rolled steel roof, but officers negotiated that away and the applicant has proposed slate instead.
There are no steel roofs in Brooklands Park. Right.
Been waiting for quite a while. Actually, I didn't realise we had a speaker, so my apologies for that. The question that I had about this particular development is well, there's two questions. First is the previous application. Has that actually expired? Because don't we usually have a 2-year period for a development to be undertaken? And the second question relates to 919, where we included a condition regarding surface water drainage. You then go on to say in 919, as the Environment Agency flood map indicates that the site is located within an area of very low risk of flooding, it's considered not be reasonable to add such a condition. But the Environment Agency's default flood map only relates to fluvial flooding, not surface water flooding, and this was a surface water flooding condition. Surface water flooding is much more difficult to predict in that kind of context. Is it not reasonable if there was a previous condition applied to assess whether there should be a similar condition applied to mitigate any surface water flooding issues on this application as well?
Thank you. In answer to your first question, the existing permission has not expired. It was 2016, so the standard permission is for 3 years. However, they have started to make alterations to the property in accordance with that permission in any event, so it now exists in perpetuity. With regard to the issue of flooding, the Environment Agency do also maintain surface water flood maps, although they are at a fairly high level. The difficulty with applications such as this, householder applications, is being able to evidence that there is a flooding issue. It's quite often something that neighbours will raise, and on the previous application a condition was added. Our opinion now is that that was an unnecessary condition and not reasonable given the extent of the development proposed. That was partly as a result of the size of the patio that was proposed to be constructed at the rear of the property. Now, as you'll know, hard standing can be added to the rear of the property without needing planning permission in any event, and we're now talking about a 2-metre deep 2-storey rear extension, so the likelihood of significant surface water flooding issues resulting from that is very low, and therefore it's the view of officers that the condition is not reasonable in this case.
Malcolm?
I went down to have a look because I was attracted by it, saying the comment from the parish council saying it was a rural village location, but you know, didn't fit my idea of small rural village, but absolutely nothing wrong with it. It's quite fine. Yeah, and the problem for me was having got down there. There's shed loads of work already taking place, and while I could look at other adjacent properties, what I couldn't do was look at what this property was like before the process started, which I think is, you know, very unsatisfactory. The other thing I noticed is that the enormous amount of damage to the verge at the front, and I don't know whether we've got anything in train to ensure that gets properly restored at the end, because, you know, certainly near me, we're getting fed up with verges getting churned up when the builders come and claim they'll fix it when they leave and then depart because they've got another job to do. And that's something I think we need to step up on to actually ensure that restoration takes place. But as I say, I find it quite difficult to assess the thing on the basis of what changes it making when you can't see what it was like beforehand by just turning up and looking. So I've got to be pretty much reliant on the officers.
Indeed, the house is, as you say, well under construction at the moment. The verges, of course, belong to the householders here, so they own to the middle of the road. This is a private road. So the reinstatement is down to them. Tara?
The only thing I was going to say is that there does seem to be a sort of direct dispute between you guys saying it's okay and it's fine and that, you know, the street is quite varied, etc., and then you saying it's not. Do you know what I mean? I'm kind of like, which is it? That's the one. You know, it's either varied. Do you know what I mean? It's, you know, and I accept that you're not the witnesses, or not witness, sorry, you know, speakers, not the sort of style police, but you know, it does seem like if that's the objection, which is correct, but
clearly design is always subjective. I think the point I'd make with this application is there's an extant permission of almost identical design, and what we're considering tonight is a smaller version of that. So really, I would suggest there's little reason to object to that on that basis.
No. You only get one go, Linda, sorry. Is the porch, the front porch, different?
Yep. So I refer members to the appendix on page 63, which shows the previously approved scheme. And you'll see that a two-storey, fully glazed front porch was proposed in that scheme. And we're now looking at a single-storey version of the same. So I would suggest that has significantly less visual impact on the street.
Yes.
Thank you. Just picking up on Tara's point, and I can understand the frustration from the parish council, because I think probably it's fair to say Brookmans Avenue has changed over the years beyond all recognition, and yeah, there's not any one style, and I guess some of the properties are a bit like Marmite, you either love them or you hate them, but of course that's not up to us to decide. And am I right in understanding that the North Mims Parish Council didn't object to the original application, but they have to this one? And I'm wondering, is it because now it's an all-white rendered property, whereas previously it was brick, and, or is it a combination of the change to the glazing, the porch?
North Mims Parish Council did not object to the original application. The original house was red brick, but the previous permission establishes the principle of changing to white render and slate, and there's no change from that proposed this time around.
Okay, it is unfortunate, and you know, years ago, Brookmans Avenue, the windows were painted white timber, painted black timber, or painted black or white steel crittle windows. Now grey seems to be favoured for some reason. But the planning, the Development Control Committee is not the final arbiter of taste, I'm afraid. That's up to the applicant. So, may I have a proposer from somebody? Nobody wants to. Tara, okay.
I'll propose and go with the officer's recommendation.
Thank you.
Sorry. Yes. Happy to second the recommendation.
Please show. And those against? Okay, that's 1 against and 10 for. Okay, so that is carried. No, 12 for and 1 against. Okay, right, move.
I think it might be useful to check that again, because that means somebody abstained and wasn't given an opportunity to say or indicate. No, there's 13 councillors here tonight. But I thought the numbers were 1 and 10. No, it's 1 and 12.
1 and 12. 12 in favour, 1 against, and the 13 of us here tonight. Right, next item, appeal decisions. Just one from the Oak Tree. Okay. Future plan applications. Any comments or questions on those? Right. Yes. Now, as we have a part 2, I need to ask you to leave. That's all right. Thank you. Fine, thank you. And so item 13, enforcement cases monitoring report.
Thank you, Chair.
Oh, yes.
With this thing going through delegated authority, maybe soon I should do the update when I have to present photographs of before I was class. Second, because this went through delegated authority. Yeah. We'll discuss that later. Yeah.